speed fix. In this video, I'm going to talk about FlyingPress and FlyingPress settings, the optimal settings, the settings that we use after optimizing 5,000 plus WordPress sites at WP Speedfix. FlyingPress is one of our recommended plugins you can get at flyingpress.net. We generally recommend either WP Rocket or FlyingPress, so wprocketplugin.com or flyingpress.net. Broadly speaking, the difference between the two, FlyingPress is a bit more aggressive in terms of what it can do with optimizations, and it can be faster in some circumstances. In my last video where I talked about the best WordPress caching plugins, we talked about the difference between the two. So WP Rocket focuses more on stability and reliability, and FlyingPress is a bit more aggressive, but it can be faster. But broadly speaking, we never want to sacrifice reliability for speed. So if you have a complex website, if you have a heavy website or something like a WooCommerce website with a lot of plugins, you just need to be mindful that you're not getting too aggressive with optimization. When you get too aggressive with optimization, you tend to break things in a way that isn't immediately obvious. Things like sliders or accordions or menus can often break, and it may be only on some devices. It might not be immediately obvious, particularly with some of the more aggressive JavaScript optimizations. Anyway, with that said, here we have a site with FlyingPress installed. Right now it's version 5.3.2, which I believe is the latest version. So I'm just going to run through these pages and just explain what we have here, what we use, what we don't use, because there's some settings here that can send you astray, can actually hurt the speed and reliability. So let's get into it. So on the dashboard, pretty standard stuff. You can preload the cache, so that builds the pages in advance. So remember, page caching is where all the WordPress pages are built, or the WordPress pages are built in advance and saved on the server, ready to go for when the visitor comes to the site. They can just be served up. So all the database lookups, all the PHP processing, everything is done, ready to serve that page. If a page is not cached, then all that work has to happen on that page load. So that can take anywhere from 1 to 10, even 20 seconds with a heavy site or a site that has problems. And once that work is done, that page is saved. If you don't have caching, then that has to be done every single time the page is loaded. So you can see that's going to be very slow and also put a lot of load on the hosting. So we need caching in order for WordPress to run fast, and that's what a cache does. So here, all caching plugins can preload the cache in advance. So what that means is they will go through the sitemap or go through the site in some sort of way and start loading those pages. So it will load those pages like it's a regular user, which then causes the plugin to build those pages and save them. So that's what that's about. So you have the preload cache, purge and preload, so flush the cache and preload it. So that's it, and it just tells us the cache status. So this is a tiny website with only a handful of pages. So we've only got 9 pages cached in total. That's the entire website. Let's go through these pages here. So optimization. So there's a lot of stuff on here. In one of my other videos, I talked about we do not use minify at all for CSS or JavaScript. It's a stupid optimization. It doesn't do anything for speed. So it makes the files a tiny bit smaller. Basically, it strips out all the line spaces and the comments, and it makes the files a little bit smaller. But modern web servers have gzip and Brotli compression, which is way more powerful and way more effective. So stripping out a few characters here and there is going to do nothing for speed. It also can break caching in some circumstances. So I'm going to show you what I mean here, because I didn't explain it. I explained it but didn't show a demo in the last video. So here is this site, and I had caching turned on, and here's what happens when it optimizes or it builds the cache file, CSS, minified CSS file. So it creates a temporary file name like this. So this is not a great example because it's related to Google Fonts, but for the purpose of this video, it creates a file name that is just a random string of characters. So every time I clear this cache, this file name changes. So what that means is if I have visitors who've been to the site and then they come back and I've refreshed the cache, that CSS file is no longer the correct file. So it's no longer relevant in their browser cache. It has to download, their browser has to download it again from the website. So that makes their second visit experience slow. The other issue it does, it can break the site in some cases. So if we're using page caching and Cloudflare caching, sometimes it can cause those caches to mismatch. And you have a version of the site that's pointing to CSS files that no longer exist. So it can create problems with aggressive caching. So we don't use it at all. So we turn off minify for both JavaScript and CSS. It doesn't do anything for speed. Again, reliability is more important than speed, so we want reliability. And it actually can break the cache in some circumstances and in some scenarios, make the user's experience slower than if we had just left it alone. Optimizing the CSS by removing the unused CSS. We've got it turned on for this website. It depends whether or not this does anything beneficial for your speed, depends on your theme. So if you have a modern theme that's very lightweight, you might not need this. Or if the theme is already optimizing the CSS, you don't want to use this. So we've got to turn on here because the site design's a little bit heavy. Broadly, you want to be careful. You don't want to do two optimizations or the same optimization in two different places. So if you have the theme optimizing the CSS, which for more modern themes you probably want them to do, like GeneratePress, if you have CSS optimization there, you don't want to use it on a plugin. So just be careful not to double up optimizations, because if you layer the same optimization twice on the website, again, it can break things, make things unreliable, and make things slower. So just keep that in mind, that if you have some part of the website or a service like Cloudflare doing an optimization, you don't really want to duplicate it. So just keep that in mind. JavaScript optimization, we don't do this. We try to avoid this loading scripts or delaying JavaScript business. So these two are related. So load third-party scripts on interaction and then delay JavaScript. This is JavaScript defer. It's not really delaying it. It's deferring the JavaScript, which means it doesn't fire until the page has finished, or the browser has finished downloading all the stuff on the page and started to render the page. So this is generally safe. These here, load when idle, load after interaction, this is basically pausing the JavaScript until the user interacts with the site. So it will make the site look a whole lot faster in something like Google PageSpeed Insights. But the problem is, if the site relies heavily on JavaScript, like a WooCommerce site, you can end up breaking the site again and actually make the site slower. So you need to be mindful. This setting is quite safe. These two, you run the risk of breaking a site. So be very careful with those. An easy way to test whether the site is broken or not with them turned on, load the site and don't interact with it. Don't move the mouse, don't do anything. And if the render is not complete, if it doesn't show the entire site, then it's broken the site in some way. You need to be careful. So that is going to impact speed and usability. But it may also break the SEO. So if Google comes along and the site is not loading the full complete version, then it's not seeing a complete version of the site. So crawlers, even AI crawlers, if they don't see a complete version of the site, they may not rank you, or you may even get a penalty. So just be careful delaying JavaScript and delaying third-party scripts. It can make the site faster in some circumstances, and delaying some scripts like live chat is a very good idea, for example, because live chat scripts are heavy and slow. But if you delay the core JavaScript that's needed to render the site, you can break things very quickly. Another test for whether you're breaking things is load the site here. So we actually have some issues here. Load the site and then look at this console tab, and anything that's an error will show as red. You see here we're missing some, I don't know why, we're missing some images here. So we have some images 404ing out. So if you've broken the JavaScript with a JavaScript delay, then it will show up here. There'll be JavaScript error. So that's another quick and easy way to test that. So that's these three here are all related to delaying JavaScript. This one here, self-host external CSS and JavaScript. This one we'd say turn on. This is where you have the site referring to maybe a Google hosted copy of some JavaScript or some CSS that's hosted elsewhere. You probably want to host that on the site itself, because then you can control the caching. So generally we'd say turn that on, but again, check the render and check that console tab here. So if you go right click, inspect, and then load the console tab, you'll see if there's any issues with those settings. Lazy loading and images. So basically what lazy loading is it doesn't load the image until you scroll down to that part of the page. So it only loads the images above the fold in this section here, and then as you scroll down, it will load the images as you scroll. So that makes the load much faster, much lighter. So generally we use all of these. Again, don't double these up. So if you're using them in your theme, for example, using lazy loading your theme, you don't want to use it here in the plugin. So generally we have them turned on here. Same thing as YouTube. So YouTube has a couple of different lazy load options. One of them, it just doesn't load the video until you scroll down to that bit. The YouTube player is very heavy, so we always want to lazy load it, but there is another level of lazy loading where it just shows an image, like a preview tile for the YouTube video, and then when you click on that, it loads the whole thing, and that's what that lightweight YouTube previews is. So that is the best one. Again, not all themes, not all page builders work with these settings, so just be careful with them. If you're on a modern theme, generally they will work fine. Some page builders have versions of lazy loading, particularly for videos built in, so just keep that in mind. So just be mindful again using these. You turn them on and just check the site and make sure it doesn't make anything wonky or strange. These here, we generally leave them all on. So preload fonts, so that'll speed up the font loading. We generally want to do that. Self-host Google Fonts, yes, we want to do that. Just bear in mind that Cloudflare also has this setting, so you don't use this setting here and then also use it in Cloudflare because you're doubling up again that optimization. And then it's use system fonts first. This is kind of a delay setting where it'll render the site and then wait for the fonts to load, and then it will swap the fonts out. So we generally turn all three of these on. Again, if you have a lot of fonts or a very complicated design, just look at the site and be mindful that none of these settings break the site. Probably more common on older sites that have unusual font setups. So just keep that in mind. Lazy rendering. This one is a bit of a 50-50 one. Again, we have a pretty simple design, like it's just a static page with some images. If you have a complicated design, be careful with this one. So you don't necessarily want to lazy render stuff. But that one for this site, because it's a simple site and it's not a long page, that's okay. So that's the optimization tab. So like I kind of said, a lot of these things depend on the site. Newer sites or newer themes and builders will be more compatible here. So just be mindful with that. Let's talk about image optimization. So now FlyingPress has compression and optimization built in. Prior to this, we were using EWWW, which we still use. It's a very good plugin, but broadly speaking, all image plugins compress the files the same. You'll see if you Google anything that's like best WordPress image compression plugin, there's all these comparisons of which one does the best compression and whatever. They're all going to be roughly within 5% of each other. So in terms of compression algorithms, they all use the same set of algorithms to compress stuff. They might be slightly different here and there, but they're all going to compress the images to roughly the same small size. So it's not a case of which one's better at compressing. They're all pretty much the same. It really depends on how fast. We use EWW Optimizer because you can use the server resources, like the server CPU, to do the compression, so it's quite fast to compress images, whereas most other tools will use an API, so they dial out, so they send the image up, the server compresses it, they get it back, which can be really slow if you have a site with 30,000 images that you need to compress. So just keep that in mind. So this is a tiny site again. There's only 77 images, if even that many are live on the site. So we're just using the plugin here for compression. Next-gen image file formats. You probably want to use web. It depends, but AVIF is a newer file format, so it'll probably be better than WebP. So basically, the plugin will dynamically create versions of the images that are in WebP or AVIF format, and it will serve up multiple versions of the image. So it'll give the browser the option to download the optimized image. So that's how that works. In terms of compression type, lossless means no quality loss. So if you have an e-commerce site, you probably don't want to use lossy. For our site, this is not a product site, so we don't really care about it's not we don't care about the image quality, but we're happy to have a little tiny dent in the image quality for better compression. So, but if you have really high quality images, you want to use lossless. So lossless is smaller file size, same quality. Lossy is smaller file size, even smaller file size again, and some loss of quality. So just keep that in mind. Optimize new uploads. So when you upload new files, do you want it to optimize them? Yes, you do generally. This will make the upload process slower, so just keep that in mind. If you have a lot of files to optimize, you might want to turn this off. A lot of files to upload, you might want to turn this off. In some cases, you might want to exclude images from optimization, so you can do that in here. That's pretty much it. That's pretty straightforward. There's really not much to configure there, but just keep in mind this. You don't want to kind of if image quality is important, you want to use lossless here. So just keep that in mind. Caching. Okay, so let's talk about this preloading. This is something called just-in-time preloading, and this site, instant.page, not Instagram, instant.page is the page we want. This will explain how just-in-time preloading works. So basically, there is a gap between when you hover on a link and when you click on it. So in that gap, the page can be loaded. So you can see there, I was hovering over that for 3.5 seconds. So that's enough time for the browser to actually download the entire page. So that's basically what preloading or just-in-time preloading is. So I'm on the site like this, when I'm hovering over stuff, it'll start to load those links. And you might be able to see it here in this window. Let's see. No, it's not going to work for me here. But anyway, so that's what just-in-time preloading is. Separate cache for mobile and desktop, you probably don't need this, but if you do have a separate site or the page builder has separate pages for mobile and desktop, you do want that. Cache for logged in users, if you're using a WooCommerce site, you probably want to turn that on. We don't have logged in users on this site, so we don't use that. Same thing if you had a LMS as well, so like a learning site, like a membership site, you probably want to leave that on, but we don't need it, so we have it off on this website. Refreshing cache, I'd recommend probably doing this, and you be careful for bigger sites, but basically what this will do, it'll clear the cache and just roll it over. This is probably useful for most sites, because if for some reason a page is broken or the render is broken, this will kind of flush it out and rebuild those pages. So we have this turned on, generally speaking. These ones here, you just want to exclude pages from caching if there's something you don't want to cache. If there were query strings that you want cached, because query strings are not cached by default, you can enable that here. And if there's particular cookies, this is more advanced. So if you're poking around in there, you will know what those settings are for. Content delivery network. So let's talk about this. There's lots of different options here inside FlyingPress. We just use the Cloudflare integration here. We don't use custom CDN, so for us, for our type of clients, Cloudflare is going to be the best. We don't use the Flying CDN service. We would recommend that you use a Cloudflare account directly, and not using Flying CDN or any other integration with any cloud provider. You'll just get a better result using your own Cloudflare account, and you'll also be able to use things like the firewall and tweak a lot of the settings that you can use for SEO. This one here is a new feature, enable page caching. So this will actually save you money. So this feature is $5 a month. It's the APO service from Cloudflare, but the plugin can do it natively without paying for that service. So we've got that turned on. So there's $5 a month saving there. If you have a simple site and you don't need the full APO service, that's what that does. So basically that page, that caches the Cloudflare, that caches the pages on the site on the Cloudflare network. So it'll make them even faster again. Database optimization, there really isn't much to do here. If you have an older site, there might be some cleanup stuff here, but database cleaning, this kind of idea of cleaning your database, it's just nonsense. It's not like cleaning your teeth. You shouldn't need to use any of this stuff here. There might be some scenarios where you have a busy database where it might be relevant, but generally we'd say leave all this stuff off. If you have a really old site and you've installed the plugin for the first time, there might be a lot of things like transients that need to be cleared out, but this idea of cleaning database doesn't do anything for speed. If your database is dirty and full of stuff, you've probably got a bigger issue that you shouldn't be DIYing in the first place. So we just leave all that stuff off. You don't need it. This bloat stuff, we don't like to mess with this too much because it can break things again. And most of this stuff doesn't make anything faster. This heartbeat, you'll see this around the web, it doesn't do anything for speed. It's just a nonsense optimization. Some of this stuff like limiting revisions, we don't. Why would you do that? It doesn't make any difference for speed. Doesn't matter from a speed perspective whether there's 3 revisions or 10 revisions saved of a page. It does save space in the database, but again, that's not really going to impact speed unless it's like an extreme scenario. But any of this stuff, we wouldn't really recommend using it by default unless there's particular reasons. And more often than not, you'll break things by turning this stuff on rather than make anything faster. I think that's pretty much it. We don't use the Core Vitals tracking here, but you can turn that on and it will give you some basic tracking. But for us, we use our Vital Signs Tracker tool, so that covers that. It's much more precise and granular, so we don't need it. But that's pretty much it. So a few things to keep in mind. Reliability beats speed. So when in doubt, use the more conservative settings. An easy way to test if you're breaking things is in that console tab in the developer tools, and you can see here we have some things to fix on this side. Any errors that come with a page or anything where something is going wrong with the page load will show up here. So, and each page load will have, you'll see its own set of warnings, and every page load there will be a list of stuff here. So you can see there's something going wrong here. There is a typo somewhere, I suspect, in the code for this site. So that's it. If you need help with your site, if you head over to our website, let me move that, I'll type it in here and bring it across, wpspeedfix.com. So we are a specialist site speed optimization and technical SEO agency, so we can help you with site speed. If you need help, go to the homepage and request a free audit here. We also have a bunch of free tools. There's no opt-in required. You use them for free. It takes 60 to 90 seconds to run a report. So free SEO audit, free Core Web Vitals report, free WordPress speed test. So feel free to use those. And if you have any questions, post in the comments section below. Cheers.